Similarly, she grew more relaxed about the impact of documentary photography on her subjects, saying, and I quote again, "I can only say that I somehow knew that I was looking at something important. You know then that you are not taking anything away from anyone, not their privacy, their dignity, or their wholeness." Documentary photography then connected her to an extraordinary man who became her second husband and her partner in work for the rest of her life, Paul Taylor, a progressive agricultural economist who educated her about class and race exploitation and who brought her into the extraordinary photography project of the New Deal's Farm Security Administration. There's been nothing like it since then, to our great loss. For 6 years, a small and amazingly hardworking group of about a dozen photographers made several 100,000 photographs of American rural life. The project was initiated to create propaganda for Roosevelt's New Deal, but it soon expanded to create a democratic picture of the rural United States, a picture that emphasized particularly those who did the work of farming. There are several paradoxes in Lange's life, and one of them, of course, is that this quintessentially urban woman began to work for the Department of Agriculture. But my favorite paradox concerns what constituted liberation for this wife and mother. In the usual modern story, women get emancipated when they leave their dependence on a husband and find economic independence. Lange reversed it. She got the opportunity to become a great photographer when she married a second husband who could support her on his academic salary and who could relieve her of the responsibility of earning. Moreover, financial support was the least of Paul Taylor's gifts to her. This was the marriage from heaven, if you'll excuse my technical language. Paul Taylor, the professor, exhibited only pride in and encouragement of Lange's ambition. He never thought she should stay home and mind the children. He thought she was a genius, and he adored her for it. And he brought her extraordinary gifts: his deep understanding of American farm workers, his powerful sense of responsibility for correcting injustice, and his remarkable stubbornness. Equally priceless was what Dorothea brought him. She brought him art and wit and social perceptiveness and an extraordinary ability to connect with people, even those of very different class, race, and educational backgrounds. Lange was already a superb and highly successful portrait photographer when she came to the federal government. But she would never have become a great artist without this opportunity. In fact, I don't think we would have heard of her without this opportunity. So with great synergy, she not only contributed to American democracy, but she benefited from it. The Farm Security Rural Documentation Project put its photographers on the road, sometimes for months at a time. The excursions were grueling. Lange traveled repeatedly through the Imperial and San Joaquin valleys of California, photographing migrant farm workers and Dust Bowl refugees in the scorching heat of summers before air conditioning. She slept in cheap motels. She developed film in motel bathrooms with no ventilation. She was constantly worried that the heat and either the dust or the humidity would damage her film or her camera. She trudged dirt roads and walked into the fields with equipment weighing over 50 pounds. She moved through the Deep South, braving Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama white hostility as she photographed sharecroppers and wage laborers growing cotton and tobacco and distilling turpentine. In the summer of 1936, she logged 17,000 miles. She frequently climbed on top of her old station wagon to photograph. She was, partly because she was a short woman, she wanted the height to get the picture, but she may have been disabled, but this was a very strong woman with incredible stamina. The job was difficult in other ways. She was not only the only woman photographer hired, but she was also the only parent. She spent weeks and occasionally months away from her children and suffered guilt and their resentment for decades. Furthermore, an even greater part of her conflict came from knowing that she was guilty of that greatest of all female vices, ambition. But she simply could not say no to this opportunity. Every farm security photographer remembered this period as the best of their lives. After marrying in the morning, Lange and Taylor went out to work in the field in the afternoon. And this was not unromantic, but for those people in that place, it was a part of their romance. They felt themselves to be part of a social movement. Tens of thousands of artists, photographers among them, were trying to fuse their work with progressive political activism in the 1930s. Within this movement, the farm security photographers formed a beloved community, to steal a phrase from the civil rights movement. They were high on the feeling that they were helping people and making their society more just. They then distributed these photographs free of charge to magazines, organizations, government agencies, and even individuals. And Lange's were always the most popular. The photographer's assignment had originally been to document the need for farm security programs. And Lange at first dutifully photographed migrant workers' camps that were mired in mud or layered in dust. She pictured dirty water supplies, she pictured soil erosion, etc. But she soon fell back on her strength. Whoops, now I went too far. There. Lange was always a portrait photographer. What she did now is that she simply turned toward the poor, the same eye she had previously directed toward the rich. She made portraits of migrant farm workers within the same visual conventions that she'd used in the studio, but the change in subject matter made them at that time unconventional, startling, even gripping. Other farm security photographers began being influenced, and a new style was actually being pioneered by that most unexpected of style makers, the federal government. Now, what I've done here is I've juxtaposed a photograph from her studio days with a photograph from her Depression work. Central to Lange's style was documenting photography and injustice in pictures that were at the same time beautiful. They gave the viewer pleasure along with education and emotion. Her subjects are never ugly, never repellent, never wretched. Each one is an attractive individual. Lange, in fact, said that she believed in making flattering portraits. And this orientation, of course, came from her years as a portrait photographer. She said that she always thought of photography as a collaboration between photographer and subject. And therefore, she believed, the subjects had every right to expect a flattering result. She never used a quick 35mm camera. She used view cameras with very large plate film, often using a tripod. So when she left the studio, it took her a long time to set up. She avoided flash bulbs. She did not like their impact on subjects, and anyone who's familiar with her photography knows that she almost never photographed indoors. Almost all of her photography was in natural light. Her technique involved conversing with her subjects when she could, telling them about herself and asking them about themselves, because she needed them to relax into what she called their natural body language if she was to make a revealing picture. She knew from her studio work that a photogenic person is a relaxed person, and she had a knack for helping her subjects lose their self-consciousness.